When I restarted this channel about 3 months ago, my main goal was to improve my speaking skills. Because I'm not a native English speaker. I learned English since I was 14, and so speaking was always kind of difficult for me, especially in English. So my goal for this exercise that I created for myself is to improve my speaking. And especially I need to improve how I pronounce words, how I structure my sentences, how long it takes me to actually come up with a sentence. And I want to also improve eye contact with the camera, because I often make this mistake when recording. I'm looking around like this. And this is not very good, especially, when you want to edit your videos. So I need to really keep in mind that I actually need to look at the camera. As I'm doing right now. So what I will do for this exercise is I will read a book to you. And then after I read one page of the book, I will tell you what this page was about. This way I will actually train myself to come up with words to say faster, because I will need to think about what I just read and came up with an explanation what this was about. Also, this way I will improve my speaking. I mean, how I pronounce the words, because obviously I'll have to pronounce a lot of words doing this. So, let's start. I have my water bottle right here. I have the microphone right here. And I'll read with my phone, because I usually read all the books in my phone. So let's find the book. The book is called Influencer: The Power to Change Anything. This is a very popular book. I don't think it's that popular because I actually wasn't able to find it for a long time. I mean, the free PDF. Usually you can just type any book name and PDF download, and you can download it for free. But this book, I was looking for it for days. And so I finally was able to find it recently. This is how it looks. As you can see, I'm on 23%, which is page 74. I started it not that long ago, but I know that I could read much more with. I could just basically finish it already, but I don't have time to read. I don't have a lot of time to read now, because I need to work and do all that kind of stuff, So, let's start reading. I'll just continue from the place where I finished it, so not from the beginning. Also, I hope YouTube will not strike this video for reading copyrighted materials. That would be very unfortunate. Make stories work for you. Let's review what we're trying to achieve. To emulate the work of influence masters worldwide, we are trying to create changes in behavior by helping people alter their mental maps of cause and effect. When we find a way to change how individuals think, they are well on the way to changing their behavior. Equally important, we have learned to limit our change targets by aiming at 2 important maps that help people answer the question, will it be worth it, and can I do it? Changed one or both of these maps and people change their behavior. To help people come to a more accurate view of cause and effect, we have argued that it's best to set aside one's preference for verbal persuasion. Verbal persuasion, that's a tricky word to say. And to use methods that are far more understandable, believable and compelling than your standard lecture or pep talk. This calls for the judicious use of actual and vicarious experience. Vicarious. Let's see how to pronounce that.
Vicarious. Vicarious.
Vicarious, okay. Vicarious. So, finally, since most of us aren't going to be in the phobic, curing, or radio drama business in any time soon, we should become experts in the use of the most portable and readily available map changing tool around, the poignant. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Let's also see that. I forgot to turn on Wi-Fi. Poignant, okay. The poignant story. Become a master storyteller. We start by returning to the manufacturing task force, whose members came racing back from Japan because they wanted, in the worst way, to tell their co-workers that if they didn't work harder, they would all be out of a job. And that's exactly what they did. They told them in the worst way. They gathered a group of their peers together and announced their finding. Their competitors actually did produce 40% more per employee by working faster and more consistently. At the end of this rather terse, is that how you pronounce it? Let's check.
Terse.
Terse, yes. At the end of this rather terse and unpopular announcement, the members of the task force were booed. How do you pronounce this? Booed, okay. Were booed off the stage by their own union brothers and sisters. Undaunted, the world travelers brought another group together and told them the shortened version of what had happened. More boos. Finally, the team leader selected the best storyteller and set him loose on the next assembly of employees. He didn't ruin the message by quickly cutting to the chase. Workers unite or we're dead. Instead, this gifted storyteller took a full 10 minutes to narrate the vivid details what had taken place. The members of the task force had arrived in Japan, and to a person they were absolutely certain the foreigners The members of the task force had arrived in Japan, and to a person they were absolutely certain the foreigners they would soon observe would put on a show. Sure enough, they did. Jeers. What is jeers? Jeers, okay. But the task force wasn't fooled. Cheers. Okay, I got it. It's like see here in. No, you can't see. Obviously, you can't see because my camera is very bad. Right here, it's like the reaction of the crowd. Yeah, I wondered what this is. But the task force wasn't fooled. Next, the storyteller related how they had sneaked into the plant after hours and spied on the enemy. More cheers. But wait a second. The employees were working even faster. Silence. This was depressing. If the Japanese workers continued to outperform the American workers, the Japanese companies would keep their costs down and dominate the market. American companies would downsize, and American workers would lose their jobs. After they spied on the Japanese workers, the members of the task force returned to their hotel and tried to figure out how to beat their competitors at their own game. Then it hit them. Why not work on the Japanese line and see if they could handle the jobs? For the next couple of days, they stepped into a variety of jobs on the Japanese production line and performed them quite readily. That was tricky. And performed them quite readily. and performed them quite readily. It was work, but nothing they couldn't handle. More cheers. And finally, the punchline. If we take the right steps, we can take our fate back into our own hands and save our jobs. Raucous applause.
Raucous.
Raucous. Okay, I completely mispronounced it.
Raucous.
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 Raucous. Okay. Now employees were ready to listen to the improvement plan that called for them to work harder. By sharing what had happened in narrative form, the narrator was able to communicate that first, they could do what was required. Hasn't the task force proven that by working the line? And second, it would be worth it. By articulating the consequences of not working harder, the storyteller helped the audience see that it would be worth it. By telling a vivid story, he was able to share these two all-important messages in a way that was understandable, credible, and motivating. This is actually very important. I'll highlight that. You know, actually, the reason why I'm reading this exact book, is because I wanna be a better YouTuber. I wanna influence people, even if that sounds stupid. I wanna just make better videos that help people, so that people actually listen to me. You know, just a quick side note. Tell the whole story. Note that the task force members first tried to influence their colleagues by shortcutting the story, stripping it of its compelling narrative and leaving out much of the meaning and all of the emotion. Oh yes, right. That's also important. Unaware of the limitations of verbal persuasion, how do we pronounce this word?
Persuasion.
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 Persuasion, okay. Unaware of the limitations of verbal persuasion, the eager employees offered up what amounted to a verbal attack. As human beings, we do this all the time. Even the well-intended designers of national social programs fail to make the best use of stories. Not on purpose, of course, but when change agents attempt to tell a compelling story and inadvertently leave out key elements of the narrative, they render it impotent. Consider what happened with the much vaunted... Vaunted? What's this word?
Vaunted.
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 That's a hard one. Consider what happened to the much vaunted program Scared... Is that C or... Yes, it's Scared Straight, as part of this American success story. American law-breaking teens were transported to prisons where hardened criminals shared horror stories about the evil of life in the big house. As the title of the program suggests, the young people were supposed to be completely horrified by these stories and thus scared straight. Only it didn't work that way. When researchers took a closer look at the program, they learned that teenagers who had been given this scare tactics had no fewer encounters with the law than their counterparts who stayed home. Why? Because the Scared Straight program left out an important part of the story. By the end of the inmate show and tell, it was clear that prison was bad. The delinquents... Who?
Delinquents.
Delinquents. The delinquents were convinced they never wanted to go to prison. What the inmates didn't make clear was that if the teenagers continued doing what they were doing, they would eventually be caught and sent to prison. And since most teenagers harbor an illusion of personal invulnerability, this didn't connect the dots on their own. They didn't create the full cognitive map. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I'll get caught, and if I get caught, I'll go to prison. Therefore, I'll straighten out I'll straighten my hell. I'll straighten out my life now. Instead, they believed that they would continue committing crimes and never get caught, so the whole prison ordeal was irrelevant. This is actually important too. Provide hope. You know what I just remembered? I actually needed to tell you about what I just read, so yeah. Let me tell you what I just read. So these 2 pages, or how much is that? Actually a little bit more. These 3 pages were about storytelling, how to tell stories correctly. The first part was about workers who went to Japan to see how Japanese workers work. And what they found out was that Japanese worked harder, and so their goal was to then come back and tell their American fellows that they needed to work harder, or Japanese will outcompete them. But they failed because they weren't able to tell them a good story. So they found a guy who was able to tell them a good story, and he did, and it worked. And so he did it by telling a story completely, like telling a full story, and telling it with emotions, and actually explaining people that they can't do this and why they need to do this. And the second part was about a program that was supposed to reduce crime in teenagers, but it didn't work because teenagers weren't able to make connection in their brain between their behavior and the prison. So they were afraid of prisons, but they weren't able to make a connection that their behavior will lead to prison. And that was the problem with the story. He didn't address that issue. So let's continue reading. Provide hope. The takeaway here is that you don't want to merely share. How do you pronounce that again?
Poignant.
Poignant, okay. The takeaway here is that you don't want to merely share poignant and repulsive negative outcomes. Make sure that your story also offers up an equally credible and vivid solution. Okay, that's an important one. For instance, consider what happened to a team of Stanford researchers who told only the negative part of a story to their subjects. The researchers showed subjects disgusting pictures of rotting gums as a means of compelling them to floss their teeth. That should keep them brushing and flossing, right? It turns out that viewing the pictures had no long-term effect on the subjects. The researchers didn't offer any corrective steps. Subjects were not given the solutions to the problem. In the short run, subjects made minor adjustments, but fear itself didn't lead to lasting change. The same is very likely to be true for a current spate of TV ads that show shocking scenes of people in body bags or vivid pictures of lungs that have been destroyed by smoking. These poignant commercials, no matter how many video awards they may garner. What's garner? Okay. Garner, yeah. I'm just googling the definition, by the way. These poignant commercials, no matter how many video awards they may garner, are also unlikely to change long-term habits if they don't offer viewers an option for the next step to take to avoid these terrible ends. Although the pictures are vibrant, they fail to tell the whole story. They don't tell people how to solve the problem, and when you leave out the solution, people typically block out the message. Okay, I will highlight that too. So when trying to help people view the world in a more complete and accurate way, couple your stories of the harsh realities you're facing with equally concrete and vivid plans that offer hope. Tell the whole story. Provide hope. So this video is 20 minutes already. That didn't seem like a lot, but actually this is. So this page was about the importance of actually telling the whole story and what this actually means to tell the whole story. It's not enough to only show the bad outcomes of the behavior that people are doing, but it's actually important to show what to do instead, how to change the behavior. And this is actually important to remember, because I know I made this mistake in my previous videos. I recorded a video and I did not include this part there. Combine stories and experiences. We have focused a lot here on the power of stories to change minds. However, frequently the story might be enough to help people open their minds, but might not entirely change their minds. In these cases, master influencers use stories as a first step to inviting others into sharing personal experiences. Personal experiences are far less efficient at creating change, since they often take substantial resources to orchestrate. But as we saw the cynical manufacturing team, you can combine the direct experience of a few with the stories they can tell. They can then tell to others to magnify a modest influence investment. Vicarious narratives can be used in combination with actual experience to great advantage. In fact, stories are often told for the sole purpose of propelling people into their own personal experience. Consider the work of Dr. Don Berwick. I hope I didn't mispronounce his last name. Clinical professor of pediatrics and healthcare policy at Harvard Medical School, and head of the Institute for Healthcare Improvements, IHI. In a recent interview, Berwick shared an alarming statistic. The National Academy of Science reported that 44,000 to 98,000 people are killed by their healthcare every year, placing medical injury at the eighth largest public health hazard in America. Hell, is that true? In December 2004, Dr. Berwick stood in front of a group of thousands of healthcare professionals and issued an audacious challenge. I think we should save 100,000 lives. I think we should do that by June 14th, 2006. Pause. By 9 a.m. The success of the 100,000 lives campaign is now in the record books. At the time of the writing of this book, IHI upped the end. What the hell is that? Ante. What does that mean? Okay, let's Google that. Ante, okay. A stake put up by a player in poker and similar games before receiving cards. At the time of the writing of this book, IHI upped the ante with a 5 million lives worldwide campaign. One of Berwick's greatest challenge is to help caring professionals recognize that their own healthcare system might be causing harm, prolonging hospital stays and even killing patients. As you might imagine, telling physicians that they may be inadvertently putting patients in harm's way isn't an easy message to share. These are folks whose purpose in life, to which they take a scared oath, is to provide assistance, to cure, and if nothing else, to do no harm. There are highly skilled professionals who often fail to recognize how their individual actions play out in a large, complex human system. So how can Berwick engage energy and curiosity without provoking defensiveness? He tells stories. For example, the story of Josie King is one for which Berwick and his colleagues have a deep reverence. Reverence. What is reference?
Reverence.
Reverence. Okay.
Berwick.
Berwick. Okay, I did not mispronounce it that badly. Meet Josie King. Okay, so let me tell you what this page was about. This page was about the importance of combining stories with experiences of people. So like first of all you need to experience something that you want to teach about, and then you're telling the story about it. This is kind of what, YouTubers do. And the second part of this page was about this doctor, what was his name, Berwick, who changed the minds of doctors and saved the lives of, 100,000 people by telling stories. And specifically there was a story about Josie King, which will be on the next page. So let's read it. Josie King was a little girl who loved to dance. She was 18 months old, had brown eyes and light brown hair, and she had just learned to say I love you. In January of 2001, Josie stepped into a hot bath and burned herself badly. Her parents rushed her to Johns Hopkins Hospital, where she was admitted into the pediatric intensive care unit. Much to her parents' relief, Josie recovered quickly. She was transferred to the intermediate care floor and was expected to be released within days. But Josie's mom noticed that something was wrong. Every time she saw a drink, she would scream for it, and I thought this was strange. I was told not to let her drink. While a nurse and I gave her a bath, she sucked furiously on a washcloth. Josie's mom told the nurse Josie was thirsty and asked her to call a doctor. The nurse assured her that everything was okay. She asked another nurse to check on Josie, but this nurse confirmed that everything was fine. Josie's mom called back twice during the night and was at her daughter's bedside by 5:30 the next morning. But Josie was in crisis. Her mother's words. Josie's heart stopped as I was rubbing her feet. Her eyes were fixed, and I screamed for help. I stood helpless as a crowd of doctors and nurses came running into her room. I was ushered into a small room with a chaplain. What's that? Chaplain. With a chaplain. 2 days before her scheduled release, Josie had died of thirst. What the hell? Did that really happen? Despite her mother's repeated pleas for help, this sweet little girl died of misused narcotics and dehydration. This story makes dedicated physicians and other healthcare professionals cry out. How could this happen? Yeah, like how could this happen? What the hell? In fact, this story is so powerful that it fills doctors, nurses, and administrators with outrage. But it often falls short for generating enough reflection. While everyone concludes, how could they let this happen? Too few take the next logical step and ask, are we letting this happen? When Berwick hears, I'm certainly glad it doesn't happen here, he wisely steers clear of accusation or judgment, something he's adamant would be wrong. The problem is not bad people, it's bad systems. So he invited the systems okay, let's see how to pronounce that.
Constituents.
So he invites the system's constituents to form a story into an experience. At this point, Dr. Berwick asks, "Are you sure? Could we check that out? Let's count back at the last 50 deaths in your hospital and answer the following question. How did the patients die? Were they expected to die? What could have been done to prevent the death?" Finally, Dr. Berwick asks leaders to do their own detective work. They can't assign someone else the task, and return to tell the stories they have uncovered. Many from the audience bring back their own Josie King stories. Berwick describes a group of senior executives. Each led an entire healthcare systems, reporting back their results at a Harvard round table. One after another, they told their stories and broke down in tears. They described their personal experience as life-changing. For the next decade, some of these executives became leaders in the effort to improve safety within hospitals. So this page was about, the first part of this page was about a little girl named Josie King, sorry, I'm not very good with names, who died before a couple days of her, well, release from the hospital because of thirst and misuse of narcotics. And so this story tells about how doctors sometimes don't see that their patients need help or need something else. And the second part of this story is about the second part of this page is how this Dr. Berwick, was able to then use this story to show to people that maybe something like this is happening in their life. And it actually did. These people came back to him and told him that they found something similar, some similar stories to this one. So this video is 32 minutes right now, so let's finish here. I think this is enough for today. If you like my exercise, then you can try it for yourself. I mean, this works for me, and I feel like it works for me, because I really feel like, I improved something today. Maybe it's not that noticeable. So, if you like my exercise, you can try it yourself. It's very easy. You just need a book, and you just need a camera, and computer, microphone. That's it. Thank you for watching. Go check out my other videos. I see you in the next one.